So our next presenter is Colton de los Santos. Colton is a second-year student at the University of Texas at Austin, majoring in religious studies and minoring in Latin within the liberal arts honors program. He has been a research assistant for 2 projects in the digital humanities: the Hochlieb Archive, an online collection of resources dedicated to the promotion of the study of the 15th century English poet Thomas Hochlieb, and CleoViz, a digital collaborative visualization and timeline creation tool. Colton's current specialization is research is centered on the religious dynamics of the Republic of Texas as captured in the literature of the period, specifically through the works of Father Anthony Ganil. His paper, Priests, Politics, and Place, The Religious Geography of Texas-Mexico Borderlands in Anthony Ganil's Ambrosia de Letinez, sorry, I took French in high school, is sponsored by the University of Texas at Austin Department of History. Please join me in welcoming Colton.
Before I begin, I would like to make some special thanks not only to the Texas General Land Office for hosting today's event, but also to the University of Texas at Austin's History Department for sponsoring me, and also some very special thanks to people who have helped with this project, specifically Dr. Frank de la Teja, Father Bob Wright, Dr. Elon Lang, and Dr. Jason Roberts, and also to my high school debate coach for helping me with the Spanish in relation to this project, because I thought it was a good idea to minor in Latin when I'm studying the Republic of Texas. So, religion in the Republic of Texas. Most people, when they imagine these two concepts together, the first thing that comes to mind is the Alamo, Goliad, and all these other sites of the Texas Revolution in which religious buildings serve as the backdrop for these key events. However, when reducing these religious sites to mere backdrops to battles, we lose a large element of the lived religion and the culture that we see within Texas and extending into the Texas-Mexico borderlands. And the purpose of this talk, then, is to demonstrate how these dynamics of religious pilgrimage and practice in the Texas-Mexico borderlands demonstrate an intersection of national, religious, and cultural identity, which is often ignored in the scholarship of the Texas Revolution, offering a more complex view of the dynamics of the revolutionary period. We're going to highlight 2 main sites within this talk, which are the shrines of Nuestra Señora del Chorro and the Church of Jesus Nazareno. The main source that we will be examining in this talk will be the work by Father Anthony Ganil, Mexico versus Texas, originally published in 1838 and later republished as a more extensive edition in 1842. The novel itself is to my knowledge, the only novel of the Republic of Texas, and it's honestly strange within its format. It uses around 5 fictional characters to give an ethnography of the people of Texas, which Ganil claims to be the quote-unquote most complete documentation of Mexican manners and customs along the Rio Grande since Humboldt's essay on New Spain, which then brings us to who is an author who is offering an ethnography of Texas, which is a genre that's somewhat foreign to the image of the frontier atmosphere that we often associate with the period. Father Anthony Ganil was a Roman Catholic priest born in 1793 in revolutionary France. He then immigrated to Kentucky, where he was ordained to the priesthood around 1818. He occupied various positions ranging from being a blanket factory owner to an abolitionist poet, but we're going to join him in 1835, where he's occupying a position of professor of Spanish at St. Joseph's College in Bardstown, Kentucky. Interestingly, one of his students, known as J.C. Duval, came to be known as the father of Texas literature, deemed by J. Frank Dobie. So his students definitely created a contribution to Texas literature beyond Ganil's own work. But dissatisfied with his state as a Catholic priest, and also thinking it was a good idea to sue his bishop when he was working under him, eventually fled to Texas following a meeting with Mexican liberal ideologist Jose Maria Luis Mora, who he met in Cincinnati while Mora himself was going to Paris to be in exile, as he was an enemy of Santa Anna's regime. He ultimately returned back to Bardstown, Kentucky in 1838, which is per a letter of his friend and bishop, Anthony Blanc, who describes that Ganil was granted faculties and acted as a priest within the Diocese of Linares, which then included Matamoros in the entirety of the Republic of Texas. So then that moves us to our first religious site, which is the shrine of Nuestra Señora de Chorro. Ganel introduces this religious site through two Augustinian friars from the friary in Durango, Mexico, which still stands till this day. They're describing how they're traveling, seeking healing to this very particular shrine in which they believe that Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared in the mountain of Tamaulipas as an ominous sign of the coming battles of the Texas Revolution. But in this interpretation comes from two very particular elements of this apparition. The friar describes how Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared to them standing in a cave and later impressed her image onto a stalactite hanging from the ceiling. This is strange in the world of Marian apparitions because she says nothing, no message is given. And then secondarily, this is a reapparition. We're seeing the same image of Our Lady of Guadalupe now appearing in the borderlands between Mexico and Texas. And the friar himself interprets it through the Latin motto, non fecit taliter omni natione, which is commonly associated with Our Lady of Guadalupe and was in Ganel describes to be featured on medals of the period, which is later described by Thwaites. It means in Latin, he has not done thus for any other nation. See, Latin is helpful when it comes to the Texas Revolution, only mildly. But it means simply that the Mexican nation and the Mexican project is one that is blessed divinely, not only by God, but by the Blessed Virgin Mary, and was seen as being continually protected from the Spanish period and the apparition at Tepeyac, and then moving into the Mexican Revolution against Spain, which saw Our Lady of Guadalupe being a rallying cry under Hidalgo. But now, it's being interpreted in a very similar way, in which the defense of Mexican sovereignty within the Texas-Mexico borderlands is under the banner of Our Lady of Guadalupe through this new site. The friar, offering an interesting interpretation, believes that Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared once more. She is going to protect not only the sovereignty, but the sanctity of Mexico, as I guess once they saw as a Texan threat. This is very interesting because this shows another perspective of the Texas Revolution. Because we do know that Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna saw his campaign within Texas once again under a sanctified nature. He dedicated, according to Will Fowler's Santa Anna of Mexico, he dedicated his Mexican campaigns through the pilgrimage to shrines and other religious sites in Mexico prior to many of his military and political conquests. So understanding the specific Mexican side of the Texas Revolution, we see it directly juxtaposed to the calls for religious freedom, which is seen by some of the earliest leaders of the Texas Revolution, from Lorenzo de Vaza to George Childress's Texas Declaration of Independence and George Fisher's publications for the Texas Revolution within Matamoros. So understanding this interesting perspective shows that the people of the Rio Grande Valley were reacting in their own, using their own identity as Mexicans in reaction to what they saw as encroachment. But even when trying to study the Texas Revolution through Our Lady of Guadalupe, through Our Lady of Guadalupe and Mexican identity in regard, juxtaposed to this new Texan nation, we also have to acknowledge the indigenous aspect of the Rio Grande Valley, which is we're seeing through the Church of Jesus Nazareno. So going back, we have to go back to Tlaxcalans in the Spanish conquest of Mexico, in which we see Cortez being assisted by Tlaxcalans, which are depicted in this drawing, just showing Cortez being assisted by indigenous warriors. And following this period, the Spanish decided to send a group of them to northern Mexico, and they agreed to it as they were granted minor nobility and other titles. However, following the outbreak of the Mexican War of Independence and the loss of these titles, they still maintained their own sense of indigenous nationhood and status within the Rio Grande Valley through the use of pilgrimage sites, which then introduces us to our next pilgrimage site, the Church of Jesus Nazareno. So as described by Ganel, there is a miraculous statue of Christ during the Passion, which developed following the period of Luis Velasco and the agreement to grant them hidalgos, which is represented by a similar statue here. It's described that people who went and left homage to the statue would be granted better rains or processions, and we see Mexicans of Iberian ancestry coming to this indigenous town, which maintained a sense of its own nationhood, as Ganel describes, and is attested to in Powell's Soldiers, Indians, and Silver, to be an interesting site of indigenous sovereignty and nationhood juxtaposed to a broader Mexican identity within the Rio Grande Valley. Ganel's account is brief, but it describes how this aspect of nationhood and some sort of exceptionalism which was instilled by Spanish law was co-opted by these indigenous groups to protect their own identity, even though that they were living in diaspora within northern Mexico. So wrapping this all together, this gives us the question, what is the meaning to these types of religious sites in the broader context of discussing the Texas Revolution? And that really lies in what the majority of the scholarship of the Texas Revolution really is. It's merely military history for many accounts. Yes, we're seeing a more expansion into discussion of Tejano and Mexican identities, but a large portion of that's being left out is religion. And through the life of Santa Anna and through the lives of the borderlands, we see that religion is playing a large part within the Mexican identity that is developed within that region, along with indigenous identities. But we also see concepts of religious freedom imposed by Texan settlers who made it one of the rallying cries of their own nation to seek religious freedom to what they saw as a tyranny of an imposed religion. So even if, when studying Texas history, we should remember the Alamo and remember Goliad, we also need to remember the everyday lives, the everyday people who lived with these events happening and was what really was just their backyard. So thank you.